Well, this week we're going to look at the 5 days. Today we're looking at listening advantage. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we're doing identify the daily drainers. And this is talking about our energy level. Wednesday is turn on this instant connection. Can't wait to do that. Thursday, captivating conversations. And on Friday, listen up roundup. This is where we're going to bring it all together and we're going to talk about healthy communication. But today we're looking at the listening advantage. I want you to stop and think, are you a listener or are you a talker? Have you ever stopped to think about it? I'm a talker. And one day, whenever I was studying the different communication styles and I looked at my style and I realized that I was a major talker. I talked about everything. I shared everything. I am sure I shared more information than anybody wanted to know. And guess what? When we're talking, we are not listening. When we're talking, we're not listening. And it is just important to be a listener as it is a talker. So let's look at the other side. Let's say that you are a listener and you're like, I listen all the time and my spouse will not listen to what I have to say. So we're going to work on that this week because that's quite frustrating whenever that happens. And quite often we literally aren't thinking about our spouse, our differences. We're just thinking about ourselves. And so is our husband. They're just thinking about themselves, what they want, what they need, what they're engaged in, right? Being a great listener is one of the biggest ways to develop a great relationship. Let's think about it. Do you like people who listen to you? Or do you like people who ignore you or don't want to pay attention to you? Oh, yeah, I know. That's why you're here, because you think your husband is not listening to you. So let's think. Are you a talker or a listener? And what is your husband? Is he a talker or is he a listener? If you're both talkers, you're probably doing fine, man. You're going at it. You can really get the conversation going. If you're both listeners, there's a lot more that comes from that talks about personality style. I'm not gonna go into that right now. But if you're both listeners, you probably can have a good conversation and a peaceful, relaxed conversation, right? All right, so today we're going to begin to recognize what our challenges are, because when you don't stop and pay attention, you don't have a chance. But whenever you recognize what your problems are, what your challenges are, what you need to overcome in your life, you can learn and figure out how to resolve it, and then you can reset. So you can recognize whatever it is that's keeping your husband from listening to you, you can resolve it, and then you can reset. Probably you could talk about it, right? So the first thing we're going to look at is we have to go first. Yes, that's what I said. We have to go first. I have to go first. You have to go first. Because guess what? You're the only person that you can control. You cannot control your spouse. That was a new one. You didn't know that, right? The second one is keeping eye-to-eye contact shows that you are listening. So since we have to go first, the first thing we want to do is we want to work on being a listener. Hang in there now. I know that's not why you came, but hang in there, because keeping eye-to-eye contact shows that you are listening. So you're going to go forward, go first, and you're going to be an example. The third thing is, even though you're tempted, don't interrupt. I'm going to go back to number 2. I want to share a little story about my kids. My kids are all grown now, but whenever my kids became teenagers, they started to learn that if they didn't have my eyes, they didn't have my mind. So if they didn't have me looking at them and they were asking me a question, I was not really listening. And today we all know how many things we try to do at once. 1, 2, 3, 4 things all at once. And sometimes people say, oh, I could do it all at once. Not really. There's a lot of things that you're doing that it's impossible to be listening in 2 places, or reading and listening, or watching TV and listening, right? So it's important to keep eye-to-eye contact. And my kids knew, they had learned that if I wasn't looking at them, I was distracted. Number 3, even though you're tempted, don't interrupt. Often, especially if we're talkers, if you're a talker, your mind runs a mile a minute or 100 miles a minute. And when someone else is talking, especially if they're a little slow when they're talking, you're thinking about the next thing you're going to say. You might even be thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow if they're talking too slow, but don't interrupt. So even though you're tempted because you have a story to tell or you want to interject, and I have to confess, I have a lot of trouble with this. I literally have to probably bite my tongue and purposely keep myself from interjecting. 4, consider nodding to affirm your listening. So whenever you're talking to somebody, excuse me, they're talking to you, you kind of nod your head, while you're listening. And that way they know you're listening, or you kind of lean in. They've got eye to eye contact. They know that you're listening to them. Number 5, try repeating what they have just said to show you're listening. And I do that sometimes because it helps me put it in my brain, especially if it's important information that I'm going to need to remember. I try repeating it. Now, this is a great concept. You don't want to overdo it on anything, or it could get quite annoying if if you repeat everything they said, right? But try repeating a phrase or so whenever you're having a conversation and listening. Another thing, this goes back to the communication styles and the personality styles. Learn to match their speed. So if you're married to somebody who is opposite of you, like I'm a fast speaker and my husband's a fast listener. So it works out, right? No. So I'm a fast talker, and so when we're having a conversation, I don't have to worry about it so much because he has some of the same personality qualities that I do. But if I'm with somebody who is a very methodical speaker, I have learned that I need to slow my mind down, slow my body down, slow my speech down, because too fast is overwhelming to them. And whenever they go to talk, they're thinking while they're talking. And sometimes there's long pauses. And for us talkers, we just jump right in there because there's a pause, right? So learn to match their speed. I remember whenever answering machines first came out, and I had to put my message on my answering machine. And the first time I listened back to my message, I was like, oh my gosh, that is way too fast and surely way too perky, right? So I had to slow it down. It probably took me 20 times repeatedly doing it, because once I slowed it down and I wasn't being myself, we do have to be ourselves, right? Then it became too slow, too straightforward, and it sounded too boring to me. So I had to find that good in between. But think about matching your speed to your spouse's speed. So if they're a lot slower, or if they're a lot faster than you, then you might try to pick up your speed a little, but you still got to be yourself, right? Number 7 is ask engaging questions. Ask engaging questions. Ask questions about what they're telling you, and that shows that you are listening, that shows that you are interested, and it shows that you care. Now, sometimes, as in with my husband, he doesn't really like me asking too many questions because he didn't ask any questions of whatever it was. Say you went to the doctor or something and they don't ask questions, and I have a million questions, but he feels like I'm interrogating. So you kind of have to find what your happy medium on that is. But all 7 of these are great things to show your spouse that you are listening. And as we go through the week, you're going to learn more as we move forward, because remember, we got to work on ourselves first. So tomorrow, we're going to look at the effect energy has on listening.